Mostly it's more of
with live yoga lessons by international yoga teacher TJ Setu every morning at 6:30 a.m. She goes live from Udaipur, and then of course we have multiple activities happening digitally this year because of the social distancing norms, etc. But the central theme is yoga at home, yoga with family. Now, continuing further with our Yoga Week celebrations, we would like to invite you to our second session of the webinar today. This webinar will be focusing on building resilience through mindfulness. As in the present scenario, we all are going through tough times. Stressful events and anxiety are becoming a part of our daily routine. We have been discussing news from across how people are not being able to cope up, etc. It is rightly said that when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Thus, resilience is key to building mental toughness and bouncing back from adversities. It is not a personality trait, but a way of paying attention to our thoughts that can be learned. In this webinar, we shall explore techniques and mindful practices to build resilience and thus learn to respond better to stressful events and situations in the present future. Today, I am glad to invite Ms. Ranjana Balyan. She is the principal consultant and mindfulness coach from Let's Be Genuine LLP. She's based out of Gurgaon in Haryana, and she's coming live from there today for us. And she will help us in coping up with these difficult times through her knowledge. Ranjana Balyan is a leadership development consultant and an emotional wellness coach for over 15 years of experience in designing and facilitating leadership, behavior, and wellness programs for corporates and educational sectors. I have personally been mentored by her at some point. I have been listening to her across. She is also a travel blogger and a wellness writer, and she regularly writes articles, blogs for spiritual wellness and travel magazines and websites. Ranjana is also an avid traveler. She has been traveling across the country, exploring the various places, and she skillfully combines the principles of spirituality, management, and psychology to build content for her workshops and deliver them experientially. She is widely traveled and has addressed audiences from different cultural and socio-economic backgrounds across in India and Asia. She has worked extensively in the corporate space, supporting learning and development initiatives for, for the both mid and senior executives at large team. Her, uh, her strength is primarily to combine and get into what the audience needs, and she understands them quickly and adapts to their requirements. With this, I leave the web space to Ms. Ranjana. Welcome to our webinar, and we hope to have a even full 1 hour of session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venkatji, for that introduction. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here on this platform, to be talking and sharing whatever little I know about the subject around building resilience through mindfulness. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for your time. Hopefully we should have a great insightful time together as we all gear up to celebrate the International Yoga Week. It makes a lot of sense to be talking about holistic wellness, because yoga, as we all understand, is not limited to the physical self. It's about physical, mental, emotional well-being all put together. So in today's webinar, I will be addressing a very important aspect of emotional well-being, and which is the subject of resilience. Resilience is a trait, is a strength, is a great asset. And if I look at it, say in the pre-COVID era, resilience was something that was nice to have. But in the post-COVID era, and especially in these uncertain times, considering all the news that we've been hearing about people dying and people getting into depression, these are all testimony to the fact that resilience has in today's times become a competency, a must-have skill. So in the short time that we have together, I will try and throw as much as light as possible on this subject and see how we can build resilience using the tool of mindfulness. But before we get into the webinar and I start sharing my presentation and so on, Just a few basic hygiene factors. The first request is for those of you who are new to Zoom, there is a chat option in the bottom. So if you look in the bottom of the tab, there is a chat box. So if there is any questions, any suggestions, any comments that you want to make during the webinar, I request you to use the chat box generously. So please type in your comments. We will have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the webinar wherein all your comments, suggestions, and questions will be addressed. Secondly, since this is a webinar and I cannot see most of you, or maybe some of you who've kept your videos on, but all of you can see me. And also, since the time is short, this is going to mostly be a one-way webinar. And so I request you to be completely present, bring your whole self into this webinar, stay engaged, and minimize distractions. So if you have your mobile phones on or anything, if possible, put it away and give the next 40-45 minutes completely to the session so that collectively we can all benefit. So with that, if we are all ready, then I think we can jump straight in, and I'm just sharing my screen. Give me a minute. Okay, since this is a short webinar and the subject that we're going to be discussing today is slightly deep, I want to make it very clear as to what to expect from the webinar, and I want to keep the focus very sharp. So at the end of the webinar, by the end of the next 40-45 minutes, these will be your key takeaways that you can expect. Number one is definitely have a better understanding of mindfulness through a little bit of experience. So for those of you who are absolute first timers and have just heard the word, I think this is going to be great exposure and you'll get to experience a little bit of what mindfulness is. For those of you who have already been on the journey or are experienced practitioners, I'm sure today's discussion and insights will reinforce your faith in this beautiful tool, mindfulness. The second thing that we can expect is understanding what resilience is. Of course, we all understand that resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. But how does that translate for all of us on ground? And what does it exactly mean? So that's something we'll talk about. And of course, how do we use mindfulness as a tool to build resilience? So these are typically what you can expect at the end of 40-45 minutes of today's session. So let's begin by centering ourselves. For the next couple of minutes, I want to just invite you to do nothing but observe the screen of your mind. Think of it as if you're watching a movie, right? Where you can see the screen of the movie in front of you. So just sit back, and I'm going to give you a few thoughts for the first few seconds just to guide you, and then we'll leave you for the next couple of minutes to do nothing but to just observe what is going on in your mind. Sit back and relax. You can keep your eyes open or closed. Focus your attention on your breath and become aware of your breathing. As you gently breathe in and let go. Feel the air as it enters your nostrils and eventually enters your body. And as you breathe out, feel the hot air that is being exhaled. Pay attention to your body, starting from your feet, way up to your legs, your thighs, abdomen, chest, shoulders, hands, chin, face, and the head. Check if there is any tightness in any part of the body. And if you feel any kind of discomfort, just make sure that you're comfortable. Adjust your body and relax your muscles. Focus your attention on the screen of your mind and become aware of the thoughts that are going on. What is it that's happening in my mind at this moment, in the now. Look at your thoughts. Do not judge them. Do not resist them. Just allow them to keep coming, like waves in the sea. And watch them as they come one by one and fade off the screen. Become aware of your surroundings. Try to hear any noises that you can hear in your environment. Just continue to observe your mind, your body, and your surroundings for the next 1 minute. Be completely in the now. Okay, so what did you notice? What did you notice about the thoughts in your mind? What were the kind of thoughts that were going on? What did you notice about your feelings? How was your body responding? Please share on the chat box. Just type in your responses on the chat box. And whatever thoughts you had, maybe some of you had a lot of thoughts. That's fine. Or some of you felt sleepy. That's also fine. But just share whatever you experienced. Feel free to type it in on the chat box. Okay, relaxed. The mind was cluttered with work thoughts. Yes, felt calm and peaceful, felt relaxed. Okay. Okay, most of you felt calm and peaceful and relaxed, and that's nice. That's really nice. The mind was cluttered. Yeah, okay. Lots of words moving around. Yes. Some people had green dots. Okay, so some visuals were happening. The mind is racing and I'm unable to catch up. Excellent. Super. Great. So some of us felt calm. Some of us felt that our mind was full of thoughts. Probably it was distracted. Irrespective of whatever you felt, or what you did in the last couple of minutes, was you were able to observe your mind and become aware of your thoughts. And this happened because you were paying purposeful attention to what was going on in your mind. And this is mindfulness. So what we did in the last couple of minutes was actually experienced mindfulness, just being aware of what was happening in the mind without judging it, without resisting it, and just watching the thoughts as they came in, being aware of what was happening in the body and what was happening in the environment. And this method of paying purposeful attention is what we call as mindfulness. I like to use two words here. One is paying attention with curiosity and paying attention with compassion. I say curiosity because it's like observing the mind as if you're almost observing somebody else. If you see a friend or a relative suffering, how would you look at them? You would look at them with a lot of empathy, right? That's exactly the same attitude with which you observe your own mind. You're looking at your mind and thinking, hey, look at the kind of thoughts, look at the kind of thoughts that I'm having. Look at the kind of clutter that my mind is creating. Okay, my body is feeling a bit uneasy. Okay, this is what I'm feeling. So you're really looking at it with curiosity, and there is no judgment. You're not judging it as good or bad or ugly, or this is not how it should be. Nothing. You're just looking at what is. right? And so there is that open curiosity, and at the same time, there is compassion because you're not resisting anything, you're just allowing them to come. And that's why mindfulness is an exceptionally easy practice. And this is good news for a lot of you out there who are probably very new to this practice or new to mindfulness, or for people who are, relatively very young, you've probably never been on any kind of spiritual journey. But mindfulness is for everyone because there is no final outcome. You're not trying to direct your mind in any particular direction. You're not trying to force positive thoughts in your mind. You're not even trying to, ensure that the mind is void of thoughts. Nothing. You are just being with yourself the way you are, in complete acceptance and observing what is happening to you in this moment. Isn't it easy to do that? And everyone can do that, right? And we just did that right now. And there is so much power in this simple tool, and that's what we're going to be exploring today, right? So I'm assuming that at this point, you've kind of had some insight into what mindfulness is. So how is this linked to resilience? That's what we are here to discover. Now let's understand what resilience is. And let me give you another example. And this time it's going to be an imaginary situation. So just imagine that you're working in an organization, and for a long time, and you're fairly ambitious, you're one of those people who perform decently well. And for a long time, you've been eyeing on an international role, right? So there's an opportunity that's come your way, and it's a very important project. And if you do well in this project, there's every chance that you will be selected for the on-site role that you've been wanting to go to. So you give it your best, you really burn the midnight oil, you get your data right, you do a lot of research, you upskill yourself, learn a new skill, and you really work hard and give a rock solid presentation to your senior team. So on the day of the presentation, you feel confident, you're very well prepared, you have a great presentation, and you put on an equally good show. And by the way the discussions happen, you feel very satisfied, and you kind of internally feel that you've done a great job. So you come back home feeling very satisfied and happy that, wow, this presentation and this project has kicked off. And you're waiting for the results. Now on Monday morning, when you go into office, you're expecting the good news. And suddenly your boss or your manager calls you into his cabin, and you go there and you see him sitting there in his chair, and he has a very straight face. There's no expression on that face. And when you go and sit, and he tells you very directly that, the presentation that you put was really not up to the mark. There was no energy, the data was just not there, the research was lacking, and somehow we felt that it was just not up to the mark, and hence we had to reject it. So you had a great opportunity in hand that you could have capitalized, but unfortunately you have failed. Now this is the feedback that he gives you, and he stands up and walks. And you're sitting there in all this, you don't even know what's happened. You're just sitting there, okay? And you're trying to digest what just happened. Slowly, you get up from there, go back to your desk at work. Now put yourself in that situation and tell me, what would you feel? What would you experience? Put that in the chat box. For those of you who are not working, imagine a situation at home where you've really given your best, but you felt that you were not acknowledged, and forget acknowledgement, you were actually criticized, right? For those of you who are students, look at the same scenario in college. You put a great project, or you prepared very well for an interview, but you were not selected. How does that make you feel? What are the thoughts in your mind? What happens? Can I have some responses? Okay, so I'm actually unable to see the chat box. Venkatji, can you just help me with the responses that people are giving?
So
yeah, I can
mute.
Yeah, Parul?
Yeah, the responses are like some disappointed, dejected, demotivations, shocked and disappointed, angry at first, and then self-doubt. Eventually, I am not good enough.
Yeah.
Disappointed, surprised, negative feeling,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
sad.
So, yeah, more or less, I mean, all of us will feel shocked, right? Now, the good news is that it is completely normal to feel shocked or to feel upset or to feel angry or to feel frustrated, right? So, resilience does not mean that you do not go through these negative emotions. It's completely normal to go through all of these emotions. And here's where I'd like to introduce you to a model developed by the famous psychiatrist Kubler-Ross. She was a Swiss-American psychiatrist who studied human behaviors and identified 6 different emotions that people go through when they're trying to cope up with either grief or when they're trying to cope up with a difficult situation. And it's typically shock. So your initial reaction is shock. So a situation that you didn't expect, even this one, you know, the COVID-19 and the way it has spread and the way it's just created ruckus in our lives. The initial reaction for everyone was really shock, right? So we all go through these stages of shock, denial. You know, we don't want to accept that it has happened. And then finally, when it settles, we experience anger and frustration, and we really feel low. And so by depression, I don't clinically mean depression out here, but here in this sense, depression is when you're really at your rock bottom, you're completely demotivated, dejected, you don't want to do anything, right? So that's also a very normal feeling. But as human beings, the good news is also that we have the capacity to rise from that low. So eventually, after having spent some time there, we begin to experiment, we begin to try new things, make different decisions, and finally integrate with the new normal. So this is something, no matter how evolved you are, we all go through these different stages and these different emotions. And so it's completely okay to feel shocked, angry, dejected, or frustrated. That's totally normal. But what is important is how much time are you spending in stage 1 and stage 2. So resilience does not mean that you do not go into denial or you do not experience anger and frustration. But resilience is the capacity to bridge this gap or to reduce the time from the time that I go into shock to the time that I'm integrated with a new normal. You know, the shorter that time, the higher is my resilience. So for people who are really evolved spiritually and emotionally, probably the shock, denial, anger, frustration, depression is just for a few seconds, and then they suddenly become aware and they're able to integrate so much faster. And for people who are somewhere midway, probably we spend a couple of days, a couple of weeks, you know, in stage 1 and 2, and then you probably get on to stage 3. But the focus is not on not experiencing the negative emotions, but the focus here is on reducing that gap from the time I go into shock to the time I'm finally able to integrate. And that is resilience. So how do we build resilience is the question, and that's why we are here. Now, to understand how to build resilience, we need to understand what happens and what causes us to spend a lot of time in stage 1 and stage 2 going through denial, frustration, and depression. And for some of us, unfortunately, we are not able to come up from there at all. So physically, we are probably in the new normal, but we are never able to wholly integrate with it because the mind and the emotions are not in alignment with the new reality because they've still not accepted it. So let's understand what really happens. Okay, now here's a situation. It's an external situation. Say, for example, the same situation that I described. Now, what happens is, you know, the moment you're in that situation, your mind creates thoughts and, you know, a lot of negative thoughts. The brain detects these negative thoughts or negative energy, and it responds by highlighting the areas of the brain that are responsible for flight or fight response, or that are responsible for defense mechanisms. And the brain triggers a lot of chemicals. These chemicals are then released in the body, and your body is completely hijacked. And that is when that's called emotions. So emotion is nothing but energy in motion. And that's why when you're angry, sometimes you feel, you know, your palms sweating. When you're anxious, you feel that pit in your stomach. when you're upset, or when you're really disappointed and dejected, you feel as if your heart is broken. So these are the experiences that the body goes through when it's experiencing these intense emotions. So whenever we are in a situation that's completely untoward or completely unwanted, all of this entire process, the thoughts and the way the brain and the body respond happens within a few seconds, and you're just left there feeling those emotions. You don't even get the time to analyze, okay, what thought did my mind create and how did my body respond, because it all happens in just like a few seconds time, right? But what your mind does is, now that's an experience that usually is not in any of our controls. Even if I'm really evolved, but if I'm faced with a situation like this, I might possibly go through all of this. But now what the mind does is, once that event is over, it records that experience as a memory. Now, if you want to visualize memory, I would want to give you a visualization. Look at it like one of those cardboard cartoons that you order from Amazon and it comes in a package. So essentially your memory is like a package, and it's a bundle of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions all put together, right? Now, this package called the memory is lying somewhere in your head, and this is something that your mind has created out of the event that you just experienced. Now, after the event is over, you go back to your desk or you come back home, and what happens is you recall that event in your mind. So when you recall that event in your mind, that box of your memory reopens, and you start experiencing the same thoughts and the same feelings and the same emotions all over again. And this time it is slightly even more intensified because we are spending more time thinking about it. When the event actually happened and the boss insulted me, it was a feedback that he probably took 3 minutes to share, and then he was out of the room, and that event was over in 3 minutes. But when I recall it, when I come back home, I'm spending like 10 minutes recalling that event, and I'm having all those negative thoughts, a lot of them, and my mind is, and my brain is reacting to that by producing chemicals, and that is flooding my body. And because this is a vicious cycle, the emotions that the body is experiencing is again fed back to the mind. So the mind responds to those negative emotions by creating more negative thoughts, and so on and so forth. And the memory package is actually really, really expanded. So very soon, the more I think of that incident and the more I recall that incident again and again and again, my memory of it becomes extremely intensified, extremely large. You know, if you think of those, you remember the ladies in the olden times, our grandmothers, they used to knit sweaters, you know. So they would start with a piece of wool, which was just a thread, and they used to keep knitting until it kept growing bigger and bigger. And every time they would leave it in a packet and, you know, get on with their household work. And the moment they finished or had little free time, they would go back, open that packet and start knitting again and build on it until that sweater was created. So whenever we recall the experiences, the negative experiences in our lives, it's a bit like that. We keep building on it until it just keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and it has no end. And very soon what happens is, if we keep doing this many times in a day, 7 days in a week, 52 weeks in a year, then essentially we are living in the past all the time, which means we are not alive. My body is in the present, and I'm probably, you know, doing my regular duties and chores and whatever I need to do, but emotionally, mentally, I am in the past. You know, it's almost like I am a living memory, and it's like a dead body walking around because there is no aliveness at all. And interestingly, as per the law of karma, what happens is, because what you give is what you receive. So if I'm constantly thinking and feeling negative thoughts and feelings, then I'm vibrating negative energy. And if I'm vibrating negative energy, unfortunately, I attract more of the same kind of events and the same kind of people into my life. And so I get more negativity. You know, have you heard of people who fail in one interview and then the other and then the other, and then they have a series of failures, a series of failed relationships, a series of failed interviews, a series of, you know, it's just like a series of failed deals for people in sales. You know, you can't close one deal, you get demotivated, and then the same thing happens. It's like a cycle. A lot of it has got to do because we are carrying that past around everywhere and we are vibrating that energy. And so that's the quality of energy, and that's the quality of people and events that we attract more in our lives, which is why there is absolutely no chance that we are able to bounce back and integrate with the new normal. And we spend years living in the first two stages of anger, frustration, depression. And the more we hide it, the bigger it grows. So how do we break this? Now, the only way for us to be able to integrate with the new normal is that this cycle needs to break. And mindfulness is a sword that can directly break this cycle. There is nothing that is more powerful that can break this cycle. Because when you're mindful, what happens is you tell yourself, hey, stop, okay? Stop right there and put your attention to your mind. Just become aware. Look at the quality of the thoughts. What am I thinking? How am I feeling? Look at my body. What am I doing to my body? And suddenly, it's like turning the light on. You know, it's almost like, if you remember the classrooms, especially the classrooms in which we studied like 20 years ago, when the teacher was not in the class used to be like all over the place. You know, kids were running and shouting and screaming, completely out of order. And when a teacher, and especially if the teacher had a strong personality, she would just come in and peep into the class. And the moment the kids saw her, what would happen? Automatically, they would start reordering. You know, the teacher didn't even need to say anything. Just coming there and looking was enough, and everything would start ordering itself. The awareness is as powerful as that teacher. The moment I stop and start purposefully paying attention to what is happening in my mind, I don't have to do any positive thinking. I don't have to make any effort to change the quality of thoughts. I don't need to force myself to believe anything else. Just the act of looking at what is happening in my mind will allow me, will automatically reduce the intensity of the thoughts. It will automatically, soothe the intensity of the emotions that I'm experiencing, and things will start to normalize. I will still probably feel that intensity, but this time I'm aware of it. And so it's not as much. And that's why it's such a powerful tool. Now, I want to explain this a little bit better by using my favorite analogy of watching a movie. How many of us have had this experience? And I know that we don't have time to interact here, but we've all had this experience when we are watching a movie with intense emotions and we've started crying, just watching that movie on the screen. And I think most of us have had that experience, right? And almost everything that happens in that movie seems to affect us, right? Now, how do you control that situation? Imagine that you're sitting in the theater, sitting in the movie hall and crying uncontrollably because you're watching something on the screen. How do you get yourself out of it? How do you control that? The best way to do that, and the easiest way to do that, is to remind yourself that, hey, this is just a movie. This is not the reality. And you are here as an observer to watch the movie, and you're just here to entertain yourself. So the moment you pull your awareness out of that screen, as long as you're inside the screen, your mind is there, you identify with those characters and you have absolutely no control over what you're thinking and feeling, because whatever is happening in your environment is completely affecting you. But the moment you pull yourself out and you bring your awareness to the fact that I am an audience and I'm just watching the movie for entertainment, what happens? Immediately there is a shift. I mean, you probably still empathize with those characters and you probably still feel the emotion, but this time you're aware that I am only the audience. And this is not reality. This will pass very soon, right? Now, your mind is also a great movie maker, because just as we saw how the mind has the capacity to expand reality, which was so small, into something that's so big, right? So all the time, the mind is creating movies. So if I've lived with a past memory for even a few days, my mind has already created a movie and it has tracked me into that movie without me even knowing it. So typically what happens is anything that happens in the environment, like we saw, my boss insulted me, or maybe I lost my job because of the COVID crisis. Again, crisis situation, sudden change in the environment. And also based on my past memories, which is called as beliefs, my mind creates a lot of narratives, so it will start projecting the future. Oh my God, I lost my job. What's going to happen? What if things don't normalize for the next 2 years? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if something else comes? And you see how we get into the movie making so easily, and we are completely trapped there. We are inside that screen. And so we have no control over what the mind is thinking. And that's why positive thinking doesn't work. Because when you try to think positive, you're fighting with the mind. You're just changing the narrative, and the negative narrative is so much more powerful that it always wins over the positive narrative. And that's why we struggle with positive thinking, and we say, hey, I want to be happy. I want to think positive, but I'm not able to do it because I don't have any control over the mind, because I am caught in the narrative. All I need to do is remind myself that I am only watching a movie, and shift to the seat of the observer. Stop, detach, become the observer, and watch the screen of your mind right now. What are the thoughts that are going on? How am I feeling? Why am I taking this so personally? And the moment I start doing that, there is a sudden shift in my awareness. Two things. One, I realize that if I am able to observe what is happening in my mind, and if I'm able to observe my feelings and my emotions, that means I am not my mind. I am not my feelings. I am different. I am that pure awareness, that pure consciousness that is much beyond and much larger than that small, limited little mind inside which I've been trapped. The second thing that happens is I realize that if I am able to observe what is happening in my mind, then I also have the power to change it, because I am the one who created that narrative, right? If you were the director of the movie and you're watching that first show, or you're director of the play and you're watching that play and you don't like some scenes in the play, you have the power to change it, isn't it? But you need to be aware that I am the director. It's only then that you're in the seat of the master. It's exactly the same. When you're mindful, you're completely aware of what the mind is doing, right? And when you're watching the mind, it's like you've turned the light on, right? And you can see everything, and you also then have the power to change it. Of course, mindfulness is not about trying to forcibly change the thoughts. That will happen automatically. But the first step really is just being able to observe it. And this, my friends, requires a lot of practice, because what you practice grows stronger. These are 5 words that are very, very important when you embark on any spiritual journey. Today, before this webinar, I was checking with some of my friends who are on this webinar as to what is it that you would expect from a short 40-minute webinar on mindfulness. And many of them said, we want practical tips on how to be more mindful in daily life. There is only one answer to that: practice. I know that there is a lot of talks going out there where people say that mindfulness is a lifestyle, it's not a practice. Absolutely agreed. But how do you make something your lifestyle? You need to start somewhere, right? So when you practice mindfulness, and when you practice bringing your awareness to your mind and to your body, on a very normal day, on a normal happy day, when things are going absolutely normal, when everything is business as usual, when everything is going as per your routine, it's much easier to practice mindfulness on these days rather than waiting for a day when you're going to be faced with a difficult situation. Because if you've not practiced, when you're faced with a difficult situation, even though in theory you understand what is mindfulness and you know that you need to be mindful, there is no way that you can get out of your mind, because your mind will trap you into that narrative. And there is no way you can pull yourself out, because you're not equipped to do that, right? So getting to the practical or the practice part of it, the first way to inculcate mindfulness practice is throughout the day. After every 2 hours, just pause for 1 minute. And I know that I was on the webinar yesterday. This was by Mr. Shetty, and some of you probably also attended that webinar, and he also shared something similar. So a lot of these kind of practices help a lot. This is an extension of what he shared, because here we are focusing on mindfulness, not so much on positive thinking or meditation, right? So after every couple of hours, you're busy in work, you're doing your routine stuff, you're doing your cleaning, you're doing your office work or whatever you need to do. After 2 hours, just stop for 1 minute, center yourself, bring your attention and awareness to this moment. Look into the screen of your mind and see what is going on. What am I feeling in this moment? How is my body responding? What is happening around me? Just practice to bring your attention in this moment and observe your mind. Do that just for a minute and go back to work. And after every couple of hours, stop for a minute, bring your attention to the now and go back to work. So if you're able to build in at least 5 to 6 such small 1-minute practices throughout the day, that will really go a long way in helping us getting used to this tool. You know, this is like a product. You buy a product, it's an excellent product, but if you've not used it, even if you know it in theory, if you've not used it, it's of no use. So a lot of information about mindfulness is available. I'm discussing so much, but if we do not practice it, then it's of no use at all. And you don't even know how useful it's going to be unless you try, right? So again, now that we're sitting and we've heard so much, let's center ourselves again. Sit back and bring your attention to this moment in the now. Focus on what is happening in your mind. Try to identify the thoughts that are going on. Have they changed from what they are? It's completely okay. Whatever thoughts are there, just let them be. Become aware of your body. Become aware of your feelings in this moment. Bring your complete attention to this moment. And come right back, right? So this is very simple. All you need to do is practice to bring your attention to this moment and do that like at least 5 to 6 times in a day. And after a few days, you will have enough practice so that when a situation comes and when you know that you're getting into that, that emotional drama, immediately you will be able to exercise this tool, become more mindful and cut it right there, right? So that's the first way of practicing mindfulness. The second way, which is even more, it's more fun, I would say, and it's more hands-on. If you don't want to really sit aside and practice for a minute or two, the other way to do it is in your entire day's routine, just schedule like 1 or 2 activities that you decide that I'm going to do this with complete awareness, okay? So just, being more conscious of everything around you as you do your daily work. So for example, I decide that today I'm going to spend the first 1 hour of the morning and I'm going to do it by being completely aware. And I'm also going to eat 1 meal by being completely mindful. So what does that mean? So I wake up in the morning. So usually when I wake up in the morning, it's that routine. So even if you do your yoga and meditation, that also has become a part of the routine and your mind has kind of memorized that. So your routine is also in the memory. So when you wake up, automatically that memory box is open. It doesn't even need a trigger anymore. So it'll tell you, okay, so 6 to 6:30, you're doing your yoga, 6:30 to 7, you're going to clean, 7, you have to go down, make breakfast, 8, you're going to come back, start working from home. So you know that it just goes on automatically and you're not really mindful of what is happening. You don't even notice what's really happening around you. So consciously decide that the first 1 hour today, whatever I do, whether it's my yoga practice, whether it's having my morning chai, whether it's spending time with my child, whether it's spending time in a morning prayer, whatever I do in that first 1 hour, I want to do it with complete attention and awareness. So here, be aware to the sounds in the atmosphere, see if you can notice anything new, be aware of the smells, is there anything unusual, see how your body is feeling when you're making your tea and when you're actually sipping it. Try to experience how does the taste feel? How does that tea feel when it touches my tongue? How does holding the mug in my hand feel? What is the texture of the mug? Have I ever observed it? Have I ever really seen it? Similarly, eat one meal with mindful awareness. And by the way, mindful eating is a very, very powerful tool, and it's increasingly used for good health and to reduce weight and all that. Of course, we're not getting into that subject, but simple. Just have your lunch mindfully. So be aware of your food platter as it comes. As you pick up the morsel of food and put it in your mouth, just be aware of the taste, be aware of its texture as you chew it. So, spend some time and eat that meal in complete mindful awareness. So every day, just decide that I will do 1 or 2 activities being completely mindful. And that also helps you build mindful awareness, right? Because I know that, of course, ideally we should be aware and mindful all the time. But because we've lived so many years of our life in the past or in the future, and we've lived it inside that little mind, it is impossible for us to be aware and be mindful 100% of the times. So to start, we need to start somewhere. So this is the second practice that will help you inculcate mindfulness. And the more you do it, you will be better equipped to, to really use this tool when you're faced with a difficult situation, right? And having said that, I'd also like to leave you with a few mind hacks. So when I say mind hacks, hack is like a jugaad. When nothing seems to work, this is like an easy to use tool. So these mind hacks are extremely powerful, and they will help us bring our attention to the present moment, right? So the first one is reclaim your emotional remote control, okay? So this is a very, very powerful mind hack, a powerful tool. Because the reason I'm saying mind hack is because you need to use your mind to be able to do this. Mindfulness is really moving away from your mind and observing it. Whereas this one is a hack that will allow you to bring your self, or to bring your awareness into the present moment. The first one is reclaim your emotional remote control. So, throughout the day, look at how other people can influence you emotionally. Somebody said something and I felt bad. Somebody said something and I felt upset. My child did something and I lost my temper. And we very easily say that, usne aisa kiya aur mujhe gussa dilaya. Or, that person behaved so badly and it really hurt me, and they really, really hurt me. The moment I say this, what I am doing is I am giving my remote control, my emotional control, to that other person, and this is something that I don't want to do, because we all like to be the master, right? And we don't really want to be controlled by somebody else. So just remind yourself that I am the master of my emotions, right? And practice to reclaim your emotional control. So throughout the day, keep that attention. Whenever you lose your temper, whenever you feel bad or upset, try to bring your attention to that feeling. And instead of blaming the other person that this guy did this and that's why I'm feeling this, just remind yourself that my emotional control needs to be in my hand. Let me just take it back. It's like if you have a toddler at home and if he snatches the remote control of the television, what would you do? You would immediately take it back from him. It's the same thing. The moment I find myself slipping into an emotional, uncontrollable emotional drama, I just remind myself that let me reclaim my emotional control. So that's the first hack. The second one is very, very powerful again, is called refocus your attention. This is taken from Stephen Covey's principles of highly effective people. And this was the first management book that I ever read. But this tool is something that I've been using for the last 15 years, and it has worked extremely well. What he says is, in any given situation, there are two things. One is the circle of control, or circle of concern, sorry, which are all the things that are not in your control. And there are many, many things that are not in your control. The second is what we call as the circle of influence, which is what is it that I can do in this situation? The question that you need to ask yourself is, where is my attention? Because where your attention goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, life grows. So if I refocus so typically the movie making mind will trap me in the circle of concern. I'll keep on thinking about all the things that are beyond my control, aisa ho gaya, I got a salary cut, I don't know what's going to happen, I lost my job, kya hoga, so these are all the things that are beyond my control. And the more I think of them, the more my concerns and problems just seem to grow. If I refocus my attention on what is it that I can do now, what is it that I can influence, then my circle of influence begins to grow. And eventually that will become much greater than my problems and my concerns, right? So when I do this practice also helps me bring my attention back to the present, because it's really putting me in this position of the now and asking me, what is it that I can do right now to get out of this situation? Is there anything, even if one small thing that I can influence, let me take that step, right? I have failed in 100 interviews before this, but today, what can I do? Is there anything else that I can do? Can I consider another possibility? Can I look at entrepreneurship? Can I look at upgrading myself? Can I look at upskilling myself? Can I possibly look at changing my field? A lot of these possibilities exist, but I need to look and refocus my attention there, right? So this is another hack that you can try that will help you focus your attention in the present moment. So having said that, I just want to go back to that slide where we began with, just to kind of reinforce. I'm sure that by now you have a slightly better understanding of what mindfulness is. We've understood the concept of resilience, and we've also understood at least a little bit on how can we build resilience using mindfulness as a tool. And I hope this will be useful. So wishing you all the very best, and happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ranjana ji. That was kind of elevating. Actually, everybody was dumbstruck, listening to you, and it was amazing. So, while the questions come on the chat, does mindfulness lead to acceptance? Because a lot of stress is because we don't accept things. So, how do you relate? Is acceptance a byproduct of mindfulness, or it is something different?
I would say it's the other way around, because when in theory, when I say accept the situation, it seems very difficult for most of us. I'm talking about the big majority, okay, and not talking about the few people who are really at a different level of, who are really evolved. But when somebody tells you, hey, just accept, this is the way it is, it's very difficult, and the mind keeps on resisting. The practice of mindfulness, however, is about really bringing your attention in the present moment. So you're not fighting with the mind. You're not really trying to control it in any way. You're just observing what is. And in that act of observing, you're automatically accepting what is. So I would say that acceptance is a byproduct of mindfulness. So when you start practicing mindfulness, you begin to develop a greater sense of acceptance.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a question now from Tash. It says, how much time we should devote for self-meditation on daily basis?
Okay, so one is there a difference between meditation and mindfulness? I just want to address this, even though you haven't asked it, because today's topic was about mindfulness. I also practice other forms of meditation, but today we are talking about mindfulness, and this is a generic question, that is there a difference or are they the same? Meditation is basically one of the ways of inculcating mindfulness. But mindfulness is much more than just meditation. It's a way of paying attention to yourself, right? So in that sense, it's more like a behavioral trait, or it's an attribute that I developed over a period of time. Okay, so now looking at how much time should I devote for myself and for my meditation, there's no fixed time. You really decide how much time you think you really need. Okay, I devote a good 1.5 hours in the morning, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years, and I cannot tell you how much I have benefited. I get up really, really early in the morning, and that first 1.5 hours is completely just for myself before I begin any other thing. So that really helps me center myself and settle down before I get on with my routine. But it's completely up to you. But importantly, make a start somewhere. Even if you're, like I said, that simple practice of doing 1 minute mindfulness exercises and doing it like say 5 or 6 times in a day is about 5 to 6 minutes of investment in a day, right? And that's hardly anything. So even if you start with that much, important to get started. Yeah, and then of course you can decide how much time you want to devote.
Sure. We have Parul who's asking how to stop distraction.
You can't stop it. Don't stop it. So that's why mindfulness is one of my favorite tools, because it doesn't ask you to stop any distraction. It just asks you to observe how distracted you are. So it's not about telling yourself that don't get distracted. It's difficult, because if you tell your mind don't think about the monkey, it will only think about the monkey, and we all know that, right? You try telling a toddler that wahan mat jao, and suddenly he has the excitement of going and exploring. I have a toddler at home who behaves exactly in the same way. The moment you tell him don't do that, he will definitely do it. That's how the mind is. So just observe how distracted you are, and just observing it, automatically, slowly, the mind begins to reorder itself. Try it out and you'll know how powerful it is. When you're listening to it, you'll feel, hey, is it that simple? But actually, if you start trying out, you will understand how powerful it is.
And here Akshay is asking how to control our anger with the help of mindfulness or with thought or meditation.
So again, reiterating the same fact, anger management is a subject in itself. There are many ways to overcome or to manage your anger. I really wouldn't say that you can control it 100%, but definitely it can be managed in a very positive way. And there are many ways to do that. Positive thinking, different forms of meditation, engaging in good conversations, really looking at conflict resolution at its root, many, many ways. But if you look at it in context of what we discussed today and how do you use mindfulness as a tool, extremely simple, because with mindfulness, again, you don't control anything. So you're not trying to control your anger. Whenever you get angry and you lose your temper, you're just being aware. Hey, see, look at the thoughts in my mind. Look at how angry this is making me. Even if you're really abusing the other person in your head, but you're being aware of the fact that you're abusing them. So you're really just bringing your attention to that emotion of anger and you're observing it. And in that, you're allowing that higher intelligence, which is much greater than your limited mind, to work for you. And that's how that emotion dissolves, right? So really, just to make it simple, in the practice of mindfulness, don't try to control anger, but just try to keep observing and becoming aware of your anger or your frustration or your sadness every now and then. And that practice itself will allow you to manage it.
Yeah, one more question which has come from Malvika. How to control thinking emotionally every time, and also stopping overthinking at a particular thought or a thing which is bothering me.
So one of the ways, of course, to do it is journaling. It's very, very, it's a very powerful method. So if you don't have anybody with whom you can share your thoughts, then just write it down on a piece of paper, because sometimes it's important to let go of what's happening inside. You just need to let it out, so release it. Yesterday, Mr. Shetty was saying that I don't stop people from crying. So if anybody cries, it's a very good sign of releasing stress, right? So yeah, so if you want to express it by punching a bag or crying or writing down your thoughts on a piece of paper, do it, because that will allow, those bottled up feelings and emotions to just free flow. Once you've done that, you're in a much better position to now focus your attention on your thoughts and feelings, which is mindfulness. And that will then further help reduce the intensity of those thoughts.
And we have another question which says, what did you say to a person who has gone through something very traumatic?
Any traumatic experience is extremely difficult to cope with. And I'm not here to give, gyan saying that, hey, it's okay, just live up with it. I know it's difficult, and it takes its own time. But the fact is we have to live, right? And if we have a choice to live, we might as well live it well, okay? And we also need to understand that by helping ourselves come out of that trauma and that pain, we are not just helping ourselves, but we are also doing other people a big favor, right? And so, yeah, if I've gone through something really traumatic, again, practice of mindfulness, being aware of it, giving myself that time, not being in a rush to get back to normal. It's okay. Take that time, brood over if you have to, have healthy conversations, try to express what you're feeling, try to share things with people who understand you genuinely, and of course, engage in practices like mindfulness or meditation. It will take time, but it is possible. But the important thing again is you have to make a start somewhere. And if you know somebody who's going through a traumatic phase, please reach out and help and be proactive. Please do that. It's so very important in these present times.
So one more question: how to be self-motivated?
Motivation is a function of the mind, honestly. So, like these negative narratives pull our motivation down, the positive narratives in the mind will keep our motivation high, right? So, one way of motivating yourself is constantly reminding yourself of positive experiences in the past and watching those positive movies in your mind. Okay, so that will kind of keep your motivation high. That's one way of doing it, but that's temporary, because what happens is the moment you have something that's negative, your motivation comes down again. And that is why when we practice mindfulness, we are going beyond the mind. Okay, this positive, negative, feeling motivated, feeling not motivated, they're all functions of the limited mind, and it's very, very limited. But when I say I, the individual, the awareness, I am much higher and much greater than my limited mind, right? So in mindfulness, essentially, we are trying to shift our identity from just being a limited thinking mind, a doing robot, a human doing, to the being, to being that awareness, which is pure consciousness, which experiences joy and happiness, which is much higher than motivation, right? So through the practice of mindfulness, we learn to come to terms with what is. We learn to be peaceful with what is. And I think that is a greater motivator than just positive thinking. So, yeah.
Yeah, just three more questions. Just that's it. One is: does crying symbolizes that you are weak? You are a weak personality.
What symbolizes? Sorry?
Crying,
I didn't.
crying.
Crime. Oh,
Yeah,
crying. Oh,
yeah.
no, not at all. Not at all. Not
Okay.
at all. I think we all have different, and there's nothing like strong and weak. And like I said, if you look at the Kubler-Ross model that I showed you, we all go through those stages of shock, denial, anger, frustration, depression. So the way we respond, crying is only an outer response, right, to something that's going on inside. So the way we respond to anger and frustration stages can be either through expressing our anger in the form of harsh words, or it can be through completely cutting ourselves from other people, or it can also be through crying. So it's perfectly okay to cry, because it's just an expression of what is going on inside, and we all go through those stages. But the sign of weakness is really if I spend too much time, in those stages of shock and denial and anger and frustration, and if I do not make the effort to move towards integrating with the new normal. So that really is a sign of low resilience, which in other words means that it's a sign of weakness. So crying is definitely not the sign of weakness, but the ability to cry, console myself, stand up, pat my back again, and get moving. That is the sign of strength.
And one more question which has come is: we often take precautions through regular medical checkup so that we do not get physically ill. What can we do as a precautionary measure to not to be mentally and emotionally unwell? Does mindfulness work as a precaution?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we discussed, right? You've already given the answer to the question. Just
Yeah.
keep a regular checkup of your mind as well. And that's what you do in mindfulness. What do you do in mindfulness? You just check your mind, isn't it? So, yeah, I mean, just checking, spending time with yourself, checking to see what's happening inside. That's how you
And
keep yourself mentally
yeah,
healthy.
finally, one last question we'll take now is how to cope up with mild depression. Is there anything called mild depression?
Yes. So, okay. Now, depression, clinically, if you have the symptoms of depression, one is that because you're really feeling sad, sometimes even we say, I'm feeling depressed today. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean you are suffering from the disease, which is like clinical depression, which is diagnosed as depression. But if you have symptoms of depression, which include really negative thoughts, not feeling motivated, not having the motivation to live, not really knowing where you are, and if you're going through those symptoms for a long time and you've tried different things on your own and you're not able to get out of it, it's always advisable to get yourself checked medically. And if you're clinically diagnosed as depressed, then please be aware that only meditation and mindfulness is probably not enough. It depends on which stage of depression you are. But it's always good to support that with the medication that the doctors prescribe. So please get medical help if you are clinically suffering from depression, even if it is mild depression, because that medication is important to prepare your body and mind for these kind of practices. Right now, the brain is so hijacked by all of this chemical reaction that's been happening that you're not even prepared for any of these practices around mindfulness and meditation and positive thinking. So definitely medication helps. So if you're clinically diagnosed as depressed, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe, it's definitely important to get medical help and then support that with practices on mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah. Thank you, Ranjana. It was amazing. 1 hour. We just didn't know how the time went.
Thank you very
And in
much.
fact,
My
thank you for
pleasure.
instilling this sense of mindfulness. I
Thank
think
you for inviting me.
everybody was kind of totally kind of spellbound. And we hope to have you again sometime in some other forum and
Sure, my
keep
pleasure.
listening to your thoughts. And before we go, as we started with 1 minute exercise of mindfulness, we want you to take us back to that and then we leave the webinar. Thank you.
Absolutely, sure. So sit back and bring your attention to the screen of your mind once again. Try to observe the thoughts. What is happening? What is going on in my mind? How am I feeling at this moment? How is my body responding to my feelings? Become aware of your body and allow it to completely relax. Thank you.
Yeah, and before we leave, I also want to acknowledge Parul Kesri. Parul has been supporting us on a technology side, and she has been supporting all the webinars through her webinar room.
Thank
And
you, Parul.
Parul is from Safari Plus
Thank you.
magazine, and she's a media partner for this complete webinar series. Thank you everybody for joining. Come back tomorrow at same time at 5 p.m. where we discuss what is yoga by Namdev ji. He's from the Vihangam Yoga Foundation. So look forward to see you all tomorrow, and you all have a mindful time ahead. And we'll see you again. Thank you, Ranjana. Thank you, Parul. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank you.
too. Thank you, ma'am.